Well, today we're going to continue our Lenten series of sermons in which we're taking a look at different teachings of Christ, different stories of Jesus from a new angle. And we're seeing that the teachings of Jesus have very real-life implications, sometimes political implications as well as religious. And even though today is not Palm Sunday, I'm going to preach on Palm Sunday because as we talk about subversiveness and the subversive nature of the gospel, it's hard not to include Palm Sunday in a series. So next week we're going to celebrate Palm Sunday with the waving of the palms. And kids, if you can be here next Sunday, those of you that can be here, and you meet me in the back of the church about 10:15, we'll have some palm branches for you, and you can help parade into the sanctuary with me. I need some of you to help me out. And we can wave palm branches, and then we let you in the congregation also wave palm branches as we begin the service. So always a very celebratory time. And who doesn't like a parade, right? Parades are always very joyful. They're usually celebrating something, whether it be a town holiday or it could be somebody returning home. It could be any number of things, but we like parades, and the Palm Sunday parade is just like that. It was a joyous occasion. People were happy. It wasn't that they were throwing candy out for kids like you used to see in parades, but this parade has one sole entry in the parade lineup, and that is Jesus. But that's a pretty good parade entry. And so Jesus is coming, and they're waving the palm branches. You would think everyone would like this, and indeed a lot of people did. But whether or not you liked the parade depended on who you were. If you were a disciple of Jesus, or you were a follower, or you thought that maybe you didn't really follow him that closely, but you thought that he might be the one, then you were very excited about this parade. If you were, however, a part of the religious establishment, if you really clung tightly to the way that you've always thought about things, and then he represented a threat to the status quo and a disturbance, and possibly, at the worst, a threat to their very lives. And so there are a lot of mixed feelings on the Palm Sunday parade, actually. And that's because of the context. When we look at the context of what was going on, Jesus' entire life was spent under the rule of Rome. So Rome ruled the people during his lifetime. And in fact, Jewish people ruled by a foreign power for generations. And so they were constantly under this foreign power of some kind. Meanwhile, their Hebrew scriptures add insult to injury by promising that they are going to be great, that they are going to be independent, that they are going to be on top of the world, that they're going to have a king who comes, which in Hebrew the word for that is Messiah, in Greek it's Christ, but that they are going to have a king who's going to come and lead them to victory and make them great again. And so they are looking for this. They're wondering, when in the world is this going to happen? It's been a ridiculously long time, and nothing has happened. Many people had tried before and failed. Many people had said, I am the one, I am the king, I am the Messiah, but they couldn't do it. And now Jesus is claiming to be the Messiah. For most of his ministry, he's very cautious, he's very secretive about it. When people call him Messiah, he says, that's great, but don't tell anyone, which is kind of weird because we're used to people saying, tell everyone. But at that time, at first, he says, don't tell anyone, because that language has so much baggage associated with it, so many expectations, political and otherwise, that Jesus knew that if word got around too quickly that he was claiming to be a king, that people would just gather around him and want to almost force him to act right away. So he was very secretive at first. But for a long while, in much of the gospel, especially the Gospel of John, Jesus is heading towards Jerusalem, the capital city. And he's heading to Jerusalem knowing that this is not going to end well. There's a clash. When Jesus comes to Jerusalem, this represents a clash of theological and political ideas. This represents incompatible religious ideas coming to mix that is going to result in his early death. And he knows this, and yet he's willing to do it. In fact, it's a part of his plan. But as he goes up to Jerusalem, he gets to Jerusalem, and he starts this, what some call a political stunt. This idea of intentionally entering Jerusalem riding on a donkey, this was intentional, this was set up, this wasn't something that just happened impromptu. The praise that the people were worshiping him with palm branches, that was probably impromptu, but he planned this ahead of time. Some people say, isn't it amazing that Jesus could tell his disciples to go into town and tell this random person, we need your animal, and they would just give it. But many people believe that Jesus, through the grapevine, through people that he knew, that he may have actually set this up ahead of time so that this person was expecting someone to come and ask him for his animal. But in any respect, Jesus gets on this donkey and he rides into Jerusalem. And there's a reason why people consider this a political stunt. And the reason why is because at the same time on the other side of town, there's another parade going on. I don't know if it was exactly the same time or not. But Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea, is coming into town on the opposite side. Because it's the Passover. Do you remember what the Passover is? The Passover is like Christmas for us, for Christians. But for the Jewish people, it's the biggest holiday of the year. It's the time when they remember their liberation from slavery in Egypt, when they become their own people group, and they are able to then eventually form their own nation. So this is a holiday of liberation from Egypt. This is a time when the population of Jerusalem swells from 50,000 to 200,000. This is a big deal. And so every year during the Passover, the governor of Judea would leave his coastal town and go to Jerusalem in this big parade. Think of like, this is all the pomp and circumstance, showing all of the might of Rome. Think of like a North Korean military parade or something like that. It's meant to intimidate. It's meant to show how much power we have. And so they're coming into the town saying, it's okay if you want to celebrate your victory and your freedom from Egypt, but don't try anything now. Don't try any resistance movements now, or you're going to be sorry you did. Meanwhile, on the other side of town is this rather ridiculous picture of one man riding in on a donkey. It's almost like political commentary. It's almost like purposefully giving this drastic contrast between the values of the kingdom of God and the values of the kingdom of the world. Here comes the kingdom, the state, Rome, coming in with everything they've got. And here comes Jesus. And what is he trying to do? What is he trying to communicate here? Well, number one, he's communicating that he is the one. He is the Messiah. He's the king that people have been waiting for. And so people, they understand this because this is Old Testament prophecy that the Messiah would come riding in on a donkey. So he is fulfilling prophecy on purpose as if to proclaim, I am the one. And so those who are hopeful, the Jews who are hopeful, are very excited about this. So they're shouting, Hosanna, which means save us. In their context, their understanding would be save us from Rome. And they're waving palm branches, which we found out in our Lent Bible study, that the palm branches are a Jewish sign of victory. And it goes back to the days of a time in their history when they actually won freedom against their foreign leaders at one time. It's called the Maccabean Revolt. And they would wave palm branches of victory. And so many people, they understand that Jesus is claiming to be the king, but they have their own set of expectations about what that means. And so even though they understand that, they don't understand the other part of what Jesus is trying to communicate. And the other part of what Jesus is trying to communicate is that the values of the kingdom of God do not line up with the values of the kingdom of the world. In fact, they're directly opposed. Whereas the kingdom of the world emphasizes power and might and fear and intimidation and conquest and death, the kingdom of God values things like meekness, servanthood, subversive love, and sacrifice. Jesus is the one who taught that if you want to be first in the kingdom of God, you've got to be last. If you want to be the head, you've got to be the servant of all. He's the one who said that the widow who gave a penny, a widow's mite, gave more than everyone else. He's the one who said that the Samaritan is the one who is the neighbor. He is the one who said that the Roman soldier has more faith than all of the people in Israel. He's the one who constantly flips what we would normally think of as conventional wisdom about what is important and what is not important. Jesus said that blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are those who are persecuted, blessed are the losers, basically, is what he's saying. Blessed are the losers. When Mary was pregnant with Jesus, when she found out she was going to be to conceive and give birth to Jesus, she praises God, and one of the things that she praises God for is this great reversal that's going to happen, where the high and mighty are going to be brought down low and the poor are going to be lifted up, which is good news for some and is disturbing for others. And so the ironic thing is that even though the people understood Jesus was claiming to be the Messiah, they misunderstood that second part, and instead they figured that Jesus was going to use the methods of the world to accomplish his purposes. They figured Jesus was going to use violence and fear and intimidation and power to overcome his enemies, when instead he's saying, no, I'm going to use subversive love, even though it's going to be a sacrifice, even though it's going to cost me my life. Ultimately, this is going to be much more effective than any other method could ever possibly be. And the church has continued making that mistake throughout history. Every time we co-opt Jesus for the interests of the state, anytime we co-opt Jesus to support something that Jesus directly opposes, the church makes that same mistake again. So what is Jesus trying to tell us today? Well, of course, that message still rings true throughout history. But when we look at this story, we see two parades coming in from opposite sides, representing two different ways of looking at the world, two very different sets of values. Just visibly, you can see the difference in the two parades in your mind. And we have to ask ourselves, which parade do we want to attend? Which parade do we want to be a part of? You know, I mean, the temptation is not to follow the guy on the donkey. You know, I mean, just looking at it from visibility standpoint, it seems like it makes more sense to follow Pontius Pilate. You know, it makes sense to follow the parade that has it all, rather than the guy on the donkey. But which set of values are we going to live by? What are our priorities? Where is our allegiance? How are we going to live? Are we going to live by fear and intimidation and power and lording it over other people? Or are we going to live our lives by the supreme value of love? Subversive love. That sometimes is not nice, sometimes is not easy, because sometimes it requires our own sacrifice. That's a question we have to ask ourselves. And so we have 2 more weeks in Lent, and as we next week we'll enjoy the choir as they share their cantata. They're going to be telling the story of the last week of Jesus before he's crucified and up to his crucifixion. And then on Good Friday, we're going to have a service at 7 o'clock in which we'll focus more on that crucifixion. And we'll look at it from that standpoint of subversive love. And then on Easter, of course, we'll celebrate the resurrection and what that means as we look at it through this lens. So I want to encourage you to join us as you're able and to think about that. Which parade would I attend? How am I going to live my life? And what rules or guidelines will I use to govern my life? The values of the world or the values of Christ? Amen. At this time, I invite our ushers to come forward to receive the offering for the mission ministries of